The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping things before we got started. As a reminder, all attendees are on listen-only mode, so you are unable to speak during the webinar, but you can participate by using the chat box or the questions box. We'll be monitoring that and try to address questions throughout the webinar, and if there is time at the end, we will try to get to those at the end. Just a note, we have reached a maximum capacity for the webinar, so you might have some colleagues who are unable to get in, but we are recording the webinar and we will be sharing it on the MParks website and social media pages, so it'll be viewable later today. With that, I think that's everything I needed to go over, so Clay, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Tina. And again, I appreciate everybody who's currently joining in, and we're watching the attendees list ramp up to about 100 today, which is a wonderful turnout for a short turnaround on a webinar about the road to reopening. And I want to thank Jeff Muck again very much as our committee chair, for our directors, again for having the thought and the foresight to put some of these together and kind of give some vision to what it looks like. Again, my name is Clay Summers. I'm your executive director of MParks. I am off camera right now, which is good for you. You can see these six wonderful human beings on the camera rather than me, because we can only put 6 panelists on at one time. But anyways, it is my pleasure to kind of introduce the panel, and then I'll be turning it over to Jeff to kind of facilitate and moderate the discussion. I'm going to go in order from my left to my right. Sean Fletcher, Director of City of Kalamazoo Parks and Recreation. Jeff Muck in the center with the City of Novi Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services. Ted Davis with the City of Livonia Parks and Recreation. Thanks, Ted, for being on. Angela Dove, my friend in Hazlitt with Hazlitt Community Education, kind of giving a different perspective from the school side of things. Marcy Post, City of Midland Parks and Recreation. And Pat Linehan, brand new and director up in Grand Blanc, going to kind of give a perspective of what this has been like from a brand new director's position. So 6 wonderful human beings, wonderful people, friends of mine, very well and dedicated to the profession, working hard through this time. And I'm just so proud of them and putting their communities first. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. I'm going to let Jeff kind of take it and kind of lay the groundwork for all of you, and I will be in the background.
Great. Thanks, Clay. Thanks, Tina, for helping get this set up. Again, like Clay mentioned, this is just spearheading this from the director's committee standpoint and trying to get some information out. Joined by several of my friends today that have had some very unique experiences throughout this shutdown. Not like all of us haven't, but they are a core group of people, I think, who may be able to give a very, very different perspective to what we've seen. Hopefully we can learn from each other. We want to hear how each of these individuals is doing, see what they experienced. And also, I think we're in a period here where we're documenting some history for MParks, you know, looking at unprecedented times. And so it's good to get this recorded and documented for future MParks professionals. So what we're going to do is I'll moderate the discussion, go around the horn, talk to each of these individuals on what their unique perspectives is. We have some common questions we might ask if time permitting, and then potentially open this up for the participants, the attendees, to ask some questions. So I am going to start with our, I'm going to call her the headliner, Marcy Post. You have probably all seen both on state and national news what happened in Midland. I recall seeing Marcy's post on Facebook where basically her entire office was in the back of her hatchback and she was packing up and evacuating. So Marcy, start with you. How you doing? How's your department? And let everybody know where you're at.
Yeah, so we fared well in terms of our department. We were saved, if you will. The water did not reach us, so I literally have 40 to 50 years of history sitting in boxes that haven't been unpacked yet because we're not allowed back in the office. So thanks for asking. It's been a crazy few weeks for us here in Midland. A very big learning experience. So as many of you may or may not know, on May 18th, that night into the next morning, we started to see some dam failures in Midland County. There are two large dams north of us that dam up the Wixom Lake area, which is a large, I would say, a holiday home area. There are also residents that live there as well. And then also on Sanford Lake in the Hope Meridian area. So the Edenville Dam failed on Tuesday, and with that came trillions of gallons of water rushing down through Sanford Lake and into Midland. So they evacuated 11,000 county residents, and 10,000 of those were from our city proper. And that all happened within about a 12-hour span. So it was pretty traumatizing. As it stands, we have about 40 homes in the city that are now condemned, basements caving in. We had to wait for a lot of those to pump water out. It was very crazy to see. Our water crested at 35 feet, which is our all-time high record, second only to 1986 flooding. We were projected at 38 feet above at a flooding level, and flood stage for us starts at 24 feet, if that gives you any indication. So we literally had 17 feet of water in some of our park facilities. All of our softball diamonds run out of a garage down near the river, and it was pretty crazy to see that water line. So we're looking at damages of about 175 million countywide. We've got 115 properties that are destroyed, 790 have major damage, and a lot of that insurance money doesn't cover most of what we have because it's called a dam failure insurance, and most people don't carry something like that. So we're looking at a lot of restoration. So we don't know what COVID is at this point. Nobody's even thought about what that looks like. People are just sending crews like crazy. All of our park staff have actually been called off of parks activities, and they're actually working with public services who are literally taking thousands and millions of pounds of garbage to the landfill right now, that people's homes literally on the side of the road. So we're working on that, and then the crews will head into Sanford and to some of those other affected areas just to assist with that. So on top of everything that we've got going on, we've got this, but so now our crews they started working and they've got most of our park areas clean. We have a couple of large parks that are affected by the flooding. Emerson Park, where we have a lot of our men's fast pitch games, and we've got park shelters and things. So there's about a 6-inch layer of silt. So we literally had to scrape and load out silt from all of our areas there in the parks. And it took a while to even get the water to go down. So we're working on doing that and then spraying it down. A lot of our play structures and things we've got to clean off and do all of that. We saw some significant damage on the rail trail, the county portion, especially Midland County parks. They saw washouts all over the place. So it's been disastrous. And they're calling it the 500-year flood. That nobody's ever seen anything quite like this before. So we're working slowly through it. It's really been a trying time for us, but our parks crews are great. I feel a little guilty speaking on it because it's all these guys that are doing all this work, but it's been awesome to be a part of the bigger team.
Well, Marcy, I think I can say on behalf of the entire membership, we're just so glad that you and your entire staff is safe, and we know that it's going to be a long road back for you guys, and obviously everybody, all your friends around the state association willing to help lend you support in any way we can. So we're glad you're safe and sound, and you and the rest of your team.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
So I'm going to kick it over now to my fellow Western Michigan Bronco, Mr. Sean Fletcher in Kalamazoo. Sean has helped out with many times at conference, has had some discussions about homeless in parks, and we've also seen on the news, many of us have had rallies, protests in our communities. So Sean, you've got kind of both of those issues going on, and wanted to hear how you've been handling those and working through those.
And we had some flooding. So
Yeah, no, that's right.
we had a little bit of what Marcy is going through. Nothing like what she's going through, but a little bit. So yeah, we've certainly continued to experience some of the homelessness, in part due to a couple of shelters that we have. When COVID hit, the shelters were hit pretty hard with COVID infections, and then with the close quarters, the infection obviously spread fairly quickly. So some of those folks had to be relocated. Some were moved to a hotel nearby. But we also have seen a lot of tents pop up, and our administration really felt like to kick people out of, tents, out of parks, out of, vacant spaces, knowing they didn't have, shelters to go to, probably didn't make a ton of sense. Was a little, it just didn't seem real fair if there wasn't another place to go to. So we have seen some tents in some of our parks, which, the problem we run into is the aftermath and the cleanup. We've really had to get our public services folks involved. They have some folks that are certified to clean up some of those sites. We've seen human waste, drugs, needles, those kinds of things. That's where we really kind of step back and allow some of the professionals to come in and take care of those spaces. So we've had to deal with that. Protests, if you've seen the news, we had a pretty rough, I think it was 4 days after Mr. Floyd perished. We had National Guard was called in, there was a curfew, and we've continued to see some protests. They've been peaceful. Bronson Park, which is right downtown across from City Hall, is a location where a lot of protests happen organically, or they are organized. And we've really been, we've turned on the power. We haven't obviously charged organizations or organizers to use that park. But we have seen, probably last weekend, we had a total of 3 in Bronson Park, and there have been some other protest activities throughout the city. We've been engaged with our public services and public safety folks throughout COVID and helping where we can, but that's kind of where we're at. We expect some of the protests to continue. I know they're walking through the downtown area, and they'll hold up a street here and there, but from a park standpoint, Bronson Park is kind of where they happen, and knock on wood, they've been peaceful to this point.
Yeah, I would just like to chime in that Sean is really good about talking to people about these kind of situations, whether it's the homeless in the parks or protests, and he's dealt with them for several years now. I reached out to Sean on Friday, had a great conversation about a potential rally in our community. So I'd encourage members, look, Sean's great at this, and use him as a resource as well. So moving on to our next panelist, we asked Angela Dove to join in. Angela has a unique perspective because her department functions within the school district. So most of us use school district buildings for our programs and activities, and I think Angela got the order right at the start of this that schools were closed and time to shut down. So Angela, can you kind of walk us through some of your
Sure. So just in case you don't know where the booming metropolis of Hazlet is, we're just east of Lansing. We have a community of about 20,000 people, about 2,800 students. We have 5 instructional buildings. Those include a performing arts center and a pool, which I oversee the pool. And then we have an administration building that has some community meeting space, and our community ed building that has technology, and then we rent half the building to our local library. So when the schools were closed on March 16th, like as of March 16th, we were told Thursday that we would come back the next day, and then you're out. So it was very much gather up your belongings, take what you might need, and you'll be at home. And at that point, they said 3 weeks. And then, as you know, April 2nd, schools were closed for the remainder of the year. And at that point, it became really all about distance learning, because just because the school closed, the state still is requiring X amount of hours of instruction. And so that was really the focus for our district. And then just seeing, you know, what can we still hold? Because in Hazlet, we have the unique situation going on right now that we had bond construction slated for this summer of all 5 instructional buildings, inside and out, all at one time, like shut everything down, which in the past when we've done this, we've done maybe 3 buildings one summer, 2 another summer. But this year it's all going now. So I had made arrangements for all of our summer camps to still be held just with some of our outdoor spaces. And as of 2 weeks ago, we ended up having to cancel all of those because what was the exterior shelter was a team locker room that had just been constructed. And in case of any kind of inclement weather, we couldn't still have social distancing if we had to evacuate into that space. So we can't even hold the things that we had intended to have outside. So we canceled all of our programs, including our summer childcare program, because we couldn't finish getting the space licensed for it because everything stopped. So with all of that, I really don't have any answers as far as what does reopening look like, because I have way more questions than I do answers right now. Because being community ed, it's like being a Parks and Rec department within a district. And the district, understandably, first goal is the K-12 instruction. And the governor has put together, you know, the Return to Learn Advisory Council. It's a panel of 25. And until they give their recommendations for districts, people may be working on contingency plans that have a combination of different types of education delivery, but I have not seen one for our district at all, because there's no point in rolling one out without knowing what the state will accept and what they'll require. So with all that in mind, I will just want to share with you the questions that I keep posing to my own administration, just to keep these in mind as we go forward. And I would really encourage you to reach out to your school district, because I'll tell you what, I have received facility use requests for next year. I got one yesterday for an event that generally draws about 1,000 people in February. It's a concert. Okay, we're gonna hold on to this, and I'll let you know, because that's a world away. When I think about where we are now versus where we were a month ago, you have no idea what it'll look like a month from now, as far as maybe it'll all be open up and it'll be great and nothing will be different. But in case it's not, the questions I ask my administration to just keep in mind as we go forward, so we're not working backwards, is if the need for additional cleaning and then potentially staggered schedules, like how much is that going to impact what spaces are still available to outside groups? Because let's say you can't have as many people practicing in the gym as you used to, so now athletics takes up way more, even more gym space than it normally would, because you have to stagger it. And so for people planning programs, you want to know in advance if you're going to lose your space. And then, someone at my door.
Ozzy.
So, what if any additional costs or cleaning would go toward so sorry. Any kinds of costs that additional cleaning, like who's going to pick that up? Like, is the district going to pick that up? Oh, it's FedEx. They knocked. So it's we know they're here. Like, who is going to pick that up? Normally, we only charge for cleaning if it's outside of regular hours, if you have a really large party. But is that going to change if disinfecting is needed more regularly? In addition to how much time from the hours that we normally schedule for facility use, how much additional time is going to be needed for disinfecting versus what you used to. Like, so it's not just like looking at what your availability is as far as is the room occupied, but can that be used, or is that time needed to clean? And then what new protocols will the district be following, and what will we require of outside groups? And then for like Parks and Rec or Scouts, how does that compare to the protocols you're already using? And then also, this is kind of a big one, is there might be spaces right now that you use, multi-purpose room type spaces in buildings, but if they're trying to spread kids out, the likelihood that some spaces you normally use are now converted to classroom space is a real possibility too, because I can see trying to spread kids out as much as you can while still trying to maintain as much face-to-face instruction as you can, and really spreading out and consuming any available area to do that. And then also how does that change other amenities? You know, if we're disinfecting locker rooms more frequently, are we no longer making those available to the public because we need to conserve that for K-12 sports? And then the other thing I would throw out there, in case it's not on your radar, is that there's currently proposed budget cuts to the school state aid fund of $2 billion. That is ginormous. It is, I think, it's like $685 per student, but it's huge. I'd reach out to your representatives and give an opinion on that if you have a hot second. But also, one upside of that might be that if there are services that districts can no longer offer within their own district, then they might be looking to do more community partnerships. So maybe proposing partnerships ahead of that, so that they're kind of keeping those in mind as they're looking at changes that they might make.
Great perspective, Angela. I think you and I prepped for this ahead of time, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, those are all conversations we need to be having with our superintendents, with our community eds, with our athletic directors. I saw just yesterday one of the school districts in Metro Detroit area had just invested in backpack sprayers, and they were going to be coming through and spraying down classrooms. So they're already ahead of the game on that. Are they going to ask us to pay for that, or are they going to allow us to bring in disinfectant and do it ourselves? Are we going to require to pay extra overtime? It's all stuff we're going to have to really start thinking about. As if you're like us, you're already starting to think fall and indoor programming. So those are great questions, Angela. Appreciate that. Gonna shift. And thank you to Fozzie and Linus for making an appearance on today's webinar. We appreciate that as well. So I'm going to swing over now to Ted Davis. Ted, my friend from Livonia. I think Ted and I probably had 1 or 2 phone conversations a week throughout the since the start of the COVID shutdown, and because things were changing so rapidly. But asked Ted to be on this because he's had multiple facets of operations that opened, that closed, that might be back open again, literally by the day. Golf, pool, community center. So Ted, kind of maybe walk us through your experience in Livonia with those facilities.
Thanks, Jeff. I mean, I don't think my experiences are any different than a lot of other people's experiences with regards to being frustrated and confused and reading executive orders, rereading them, rewatching press conferences. I joke with everyone that I pay attention to the lecture and I read the textbook. So I watch every press conference and I read every executive order, because that's so much is said in the press conferences and not in the executive orders. I was kind of writing down a timeline of everything that's happened over the last 3 months, and thinking how much our world has turned upside down during that time. I mean, our world with regard to COVID, and then everything that, in Parks and Recreation. March 13th, we closed the rec center here in Livonia. and we stopped all programming. March 21st, I can remember, Oakland County Executive closed all playgrounds outdoors, and we followed suit quickly after that. We closed golf courses, we closed dog park, and then from there we had about a 4 or 5 week kind of wait, hurry up and wait, and we kept making plans to reopen. And golf courses reopened on April 24th. The governor was kind enough to give us exactly till the end of the press conferences till golf courses were eligible to reopen, which was good. And since then, it's gotten much better, which has been very positive for all of us, I'm sure. But golf courses reopened, and then there was so many restrictions with regards to could they use carts, could they not use carts, single riders in the carts, disinfecting that went on. So we were lucky in the sense that golf course got to be kind of our guinea pig and test things out and how this was going to work. We did, starting last week, we reopened playgrounds and our dog park. Starting Monday, courses now can utilize golf carts with two people to a cart. So that was positive. We're lucky also, we furloughed a lot of people, and we're actually the first city department that's back with all of our full-time employees in Livonia. So that was a big change. I mean, Jeff and I had shared multiple conversations where you get a department to where you finally want it to be, and you really feel like you're hitting your stride. And now we furloughed 8 of 13 people. Which was, to anyone that's ever done that, or to anyone that's ever had to make those calls, to anyone that's ever received them, it's an awful thing to do. And it was heartbreaking. Even though I had every intention of bringing everyone back, you don't know what the future holds. But we're lucky in the sense that everyone is back now. All full-time employees are back. We start outdoor rentals on June 15th. Our summer session, which I'm thankful we didn't cancel now, because I was being very stubborn. We kept it in the books. We're starting June 22nd, and we'll run most of our programs outdoors to start. Our outdoor pools, if you're in Metro Detroit, the roller coaster of Macomb, Wayne, and Oakland County Health Departments putting out a health department order closing all pools indefinitely until COVID-19 was no longer a threat. And then 3 days later, the governor comes on with a press conference and says outdoor pools can open with 50% capacity. I might have swore a couple times during that. Every single frustration that everyone in the profession has had, I am right there with you, right? It's been a roller coaster. That was probably the biggest one. So we went from literally telling contractors, notifying all staff, we're not going to open outdoor pools this summer. We don't even know when we're going to open indoor pools, to 3 days later, scrambling and making phone calls. And I'm on a phone call with the mayor, and the mayor, is asking, what do you need? You can have anything you want to get this done. What do you need? Which is great to have that kind of support. And I said, if I had hair, I would have lost it at this point with all of the up back and forth. But we are going to open up our outdoor pools starting on June 22nd. So for us, it's really only about a week late. And we're also moving forward with our playground program. So we're one of the few communities that still is running those old school, go to a park, drop in 4 hours, play outside playground program. And if you've read the LARA, guidelines for camps, I wish they'd just come out and say, don't run anything indoors, because that's pretty much what they spend 10 pages telling you to do, is don't run anything indoors. So we're going to try, we're still going to continue to work on summer camps indoors, because that's where our summer camps take place for the most part. I don't know how that's going to work out. I'm curious to see. It's a back and forth conversation, and any advice I could give to anyone out there would be adaptable, be patient, read the executive orders, read LARA, read whatever your county's putting out. They're trying to give you the information. It's just not always in the format and as timely as you'd like to receive it. and be nimble. I mean, that's where we think we've done a good job. I would say I have been stubborn personally. I haven't canceled summer programs. We haven't canceled summer events simply because of stubbornness on my part, which is not a positive thing most of the time. But this time maybe it is. I mean, it's forcing us to look at how we're offering events. We're going to go ahead and offer summer concerts. We're going to have 100 people out in the park, and then we're going to get an FM transmitter, and people can listen to the concert in their car. I mean, that's how we're trying to take a problem and solve it as best we can. And I encourage, every community out there to do that. It's weird because we've been backburnered, and how many of us have been furloughed, and police and fire have been extremely important during this, and obviously nurses and doctors. But when you look at what people are flocking to, it's everything we offer. It's all of our parks. I mean, I can't go to our parks have been crowded like they've never been crowded before. I made the mistake of going to, I went to Heinz over the weekend, and it was a mess. It was a zoo. And I kind of laughed and said, that's how important we are when everything's falling apart. People are looking for us and what we offer more than ever. And that's what I would tell everyone. Sorry if I'm rambling, Jeff. I mean, that's
no, not at all, Ted. That's great. I think, the stubbornness is a virtue at this point in some cases. So it's
my wife would say different, but
yeah, exactly. So same here. So I did want to move now on to a very unique perspective, I think, on Mr. Linehan. January MParks conference, I remember having to talk with you about Grand Blanc and, hey, I'm going to go for the director job. And then I think February you got it, and then March hit. So tell us a little bit more about your experience, and maybe you're the kind of the poster child right now for the so you want to be a director. Tell us how you handled it.
So definitely very unique. So in the community, the Grand Blanc Parks and Recreation Commission, which was a partnership between the school district, the city of Grand Blanc, and Grand Blanc Township, doesn't exist anymore. The commission was absorbed by the township, and the township has taken on all those responsibilities. As far as that goes, that happened about a couple weeks before I started. My first official day on the job was when we had to make the decision on who was essential. I didn't even get all the way through my onboarding process before I'm trying to figure out, what we need to do to run the senior center, and those sort of things. So, essentially trying to build a department from the bottom up in the midst of COVID has been extremely challenging. Out here when things first hit, people really weren't taking it seriously too much. Genesee County got hit fairly hard with the COVID, and that first warm day that we had there in late March, early April, I went into our regional park, and the dog park was so packed you could barely move in it. People were out there having picnics, and playgrounds were full and everything. And after that, I had to make the hard decision that we were going to close down a lot of that stuff. It got to the point where we had to remove the rims off the basketball hoops so people would stop playing. And even at that point, you would still have people out there, bouncing it off the backboard. So we had to snow fence off pavilions and everything. And as far as our programming goes, a lot of our stuff is done inside the schools. So, having that uncertainty, after we had a conversation with the superintendent, he's like, you're not going to get anything until the end of summer. We were not prepared for the governor to reopen things so soon. and release the restrictions that she did. So, we went from, we're a small department. I have the assistant director. She's been working on and off, during the whole COVID-19 situation. And I've had 2 maintenance people out in the park just trying to get by and, trying to figure out what exactly we can offer. And when that, we went from about 40 to 45 calls a day to, upwards of 90 calls after she made the announcement. And then we're trying to work with our contractors because obviously, when we got shut down, that's when we would be doing hiring. The only staff that we had on were lifeguards because open swim, and that goes on all year round. So, recreation staff, we didn't hire. We weren't anticipating really needing to hire. So, that created the situation where, let's figure out what we can do outside and, maybe try and offer some different types of programs that we haven't before. We did not have much success with trying to get, instructors to do Zoom and that. Senior Center did regular direct programs. That didn't work out well for us. But we've definitely got hooked up with some different instructors in that going forward. So hopefully, we can kind of tailor some of our offerings. Summer camp, we're not going to do some of the restrictions and that, it just makes it to the point for us that, with our small staff and even what we would have hired, we won't be able to do it. The last conversation that we had as a township was that we're looking probably best case scenario $250,000 cut to the revenue sharing for the year. It's a lot better than the 1.5 million that they initially projected. But that affects us quite a bit because all of our revenue is program-based, field rental-based, all that. And for 2 months, we were refunding, $10,000 to $15,000 a month, in fees. And with that, the township was, expecting this to be a benchmark year, so we could figure out, what our costs were, and that they would have to try and, supplement some of the budget as we were figuring that out. So, COVID has just added to that. Right now, our sports fields for practicing and for games, tournaments, and that, we're pretty much booked now. Actually, because of what happened up in Midland, NSA, got a whole bunch of our fields because they're actually run out of Fenton. So, we were close and, we were available. So, trying to work through that. And, trying to figure out how that's going to work, with social distancing, with the dugouts, with, bathrooms, with the participants. We're looking at trying to follow the document that USA Softball put out, but I'm sure there's going to be a couple things that, through risk management and through corporate counsel, they're going to say, yeah, we have to do this. So, trying to work for that. Put things in perspective. I was on a meeting with a local group that does, that's promoting bike trails within the township, and the local bike shop, you cannot get a mountain bike for the next 2 months. They've sold out of all their bikes, Trek and Specialized out of the warehouses, and they're going to be putting bikes together for the next 2 months for people. So, you're seeing a lot more of that activity out there, and we've seen it out in the park. One of our trail counters was up about 50% from last year, and we've seen that all throughout there, which is a good thing. But we're also getting the phone calls from the parents that, they don't care what program that their kids are in. They just want to put their kids in the program. So, people are really wanting it right now, and I'm just trying to figure out how we can offer it.
Thanks, Pat. It's definitely got to be a challenge for you first time out. So we've got a lot of questions coming in from attendees, a lot of it related to just physically things with playgrounds, with the pools, park amenities, programs. I'm not sure we're going to be able to touch on all of those today. In fact, Mr. Fletcher recommended that maybe we need to do a few more of these that are just really specific to some of those items with some different panelists. But one question came through that I think is really interesting that I'd like to get some opinions from you guys on are, what have you learned from this, that if this fires back up again and we go into another stay-at-home order, in the fall or in the winter, are there any lessons learned that you can think of? How would you approach things differently? Or what are you doing now to prepare for that? Anyone want to take that one on?
I'm going to start this one. One thing we don't do are resident and non-resident rates, and it's a really scary, sticky widget when we haven't been there yet. But what I'm realizing is with our pool, which we are not opening this summer, we've made that decision. I'm sticking to it, and I'm getting a lot of slack from the community. It is what it is. I'm just going to make that decision and move on. However, if next year, I'm already thinking about next year, and if next year we find ourselves in that same position, I need to figure out who I can let in that pool. And I know that sounds awful, but I'm going to have to figure out a resident and non-resident rate, or figure out what that looks like, so that if I have to schedule time next year, because we are going to open next year, if I have to schedule that time, I need to know who my residents are. And so these are things I'm thinking about now going forward to start capturing that information, so that if we have to play that game next year, I'll be ready to play it.
We aren't opening our pool either. It just became a matter of, can we operate that pool safely? And you couple that with, it's always difficult to get lifeguards. And then we figured we were going to need staff, to help remind people about physical distancing, make sure locker rooms were sanitized and, various surfaces were sanitized more frequently. I think you could do a session on, all the questions about, are you sanitizing playground equipment? How are you doing it? How are you doing it effectively? Is it a PR thing? Is it a safety thing? I mean, the science, there isn't any science, and the guidelines are almost non-existent. So it's upon us to make that decision. And I always want kids to be safe, of course. We all want that, but we're not really getting, good information. It's like, should you? Well, you probably should, but do you have to? So then I always get the question, well, what are your, colleagues doing? And I'm like, I mean, it's a mixed bag. Jeff's doing one thing, Ted's doing something, Marcy's, team is doing something. So you can't base it on what everybody else is doing. You have to base it on your best judgment, I guess, which is tricky because we're all trying to save a little money because we know revenue's not coming in. So can you afford to sanitize playground equipment? Can you not afford to sanitize? That's a tricky one for me, and I think you could really set a couple specific topics, and I think you'd get a lot of people attending weekly or bi-weekly, and I don't want to say we should or shouldn't do it because I don't know how much work it takes to do it, but based on having 86 people attend this, and I'm sure a lot of people are getting a lot of good information from different panelists, you could swap out different panelists and get different information from different organizations.
Ted, what about your community center? Thoughts on the future of that and what it looks like? I know not to put you on the spot, but I did see that, there's private gyms, they're forming an association and they're going to be making some recommendations and petitioning things. Are you kind of in the same spot as Marcy about residents, non-residents? Where are you at?
Yeah, I think, we already have established resident and non-resident fees. And then with the rec center, we have, member, non-member fees. So we have multiple different fee structures. I mean, it's hard to say what we're going to take out of this because we're not through it yet, right? We're still, I hate to say it, we're still smack dab in the middle of it. I laughed, I saw something on Facebook that said, like, if this was a 9-inning game, we just wrapped up the bottom of the second inning. And I was like, crap. That's a terrible thought. Because, I mean, I'm sure to all of us, like March and April felt like the longest damn years of my life. I mean, those were long years. You know, I think for a lot of us, I mean, I've heard so many communities talk about, I'm not going to print my fall brochure, or, you know, I'm just going to put everything on hold. I mean, I know for us, I mean, we're looking at a, you know, $1.5 to $2 million budget shortfall this fiscal year. You know, next year, I think the budget I put together, it's going to be $1 million shortfall. I mean, those are hard pills to swallow. And Angela, I mean, I don't envy any school district with the funding. I think it's going to, you know, we're going to have to look at what are our core beliefs, what are our core programs, what are our core offerings, and focus on those. And then, you know, and that's what we're going to have to focus in. If anything, this is going to further define out what Parks and Recreation is in each community, right? Because you're going to be forced to make decisions. If this flares up and we go through another, you know, shutdown, and Patrick talked about online offering. I mean, we've offered so many online programs. People want it. People just don't want to pay for it. That's what we've seen more and more is people want it for free. They don't want to pay for online offerings. I think with rare exceptions. So yeah, I mean, I don't even want to think about the flare up. I mean, it's unbelievable.
So let's shift gears then and get away from that. For those of you who have started offering programs back up, I think there's a question from the attendees as to what are the responses been. I can tell you here in Novi, you know, last Monday when the governor was talking, literally the phone was ringing off the hook. You know, when can I use the fields? Can I run my tournament? When is adult softball starting? Pat, I think I saw on Facebook you launched, you know, like that night, hey, register for adult softball, it's open. Or I could be wrong, but so, you know, for those of you who have launched programs or have programs coming up, what's the response been like? Some of our attendees would like to hear that. Pat, you want to start?
Yeah, like what you said, you know, our phones were ringing off the hooks as that was going on, and, you know, into the night. You know, we have our cell phones ported from the main line, and, you know, there were people calling up to 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, you know, trying to get information. And, you know, we didn't expect, you know, things to happen that soon. So, you know, we started rolling out programs, you know, over 3 to 4 days, you know, after talking with instructors to see, you know, how we could do it safely. But yeah, our programs are filling up, you know, pretty quickly. So, you know, trying to figure out, you know, maybe some more here going into the future that we can do to help supplement it, you know, and some of it too. You know, if we can have 100 people and we can do, you know, a organized activity, you know, like yoga or a fitness class in the green in the park, you know, we need to, you know, take that opportunity and, you know, be able to offer those sort of things. And, you know, we've talked with some of the instructors too about, you know, stacking programs, you know, so maybe, you know, it may be limited to how many people are in it, but you know, maybe we offer a couple sessions in a day where, you know, that gives people the opportunity to do it. So, yeah, you know, the community really wants it right now. So,
Ted, Sean, you got any programs that you've launched or getting ready to launch? How's their response been?
Jeff, just like you guys did, I mean, the governor's order, and the softball and baseball field came out of the woodwork, begging for fields. I think probably everyone had that. We had already gone through and we had summer program registration ongoing. We've seen it about 25% of where we would normally be right now. I think we did a survey in April and one in early May to kind of gauge where people were at with coming back. And it was, I think, Jeff, you did one too. We saw it was probably about 50-50 whether people were interested in coming back. And I really think it's dependent upon the program. I read actually last night an article on the New York Times. They surveyed 6,000 epidemiologists, and they asked them a series of questions like, what would they come back to? Where do they see themselves doing this summer, in the fall, and then like a year from now? And they had like indoor gyms. They had, 40% said they'd come back in the fall. So that meant over 60% said in a year. I think we're going to just see it all over the spectrum. I mean, I think outdoor activities, there's going to be a premium placed on it for outdoor classes, for softball leagues. And that was why we made the decision with the pools, was we felt it was so important. It was reasonably safe being outdoors. And, for us also, it's millage dollars, right? We have a Parks and Recreation dedicated millage. And Jeff and I talked about this, at length. I didn't want to get in the position where we weren't offering anything for another season and having to answer the question of what are we providing our residents for their tax dollars. So we've actually seen a fair amount register, but not anything near normal.
Sean, are you launching some programs?
We're getting started July 6th. We got to the point where we just wanted to have a date to put out there because everybody was asking, what are things going to start up? And so we decided on July 6th after the holiday, and this was back like in, April, end of April, May. So we wanted to just be able to say, this is when we plan to get started based on, whatever happens. We're about to open up registration for things. So we'll kind of see how that goes. My suspicion is that many parents are going to be ready for kids to go to the park for their, playground program. We call it Super Rec. We aren't offering day camp. We're funneling everything to, I think, 4 sites throughout the community. So if you wanted to do day camp, we're offering Super Rec, which is like Ted's program, the playground, where you have, staff, and in our case, 2 meals are served per day. And we have coordinated activities and reading time and arts and crafts and those kinds of things. So we'll see. We hope that we get some good attendance and see how it goes.
So we had scheduled this webinar to be an hour, and just wanted to, in the respect for everyone's time, kind of wanted to keep it at that. So just my last question for all the panelists is any last words for your MParks colleagues, the MParks staff, lessons learned or philosophical thoughts as we close out this webinar? I definitely agree with Sean. It looks like we need to do some more. I would also encourage maybe some of our other committees and focus groups to, I think if you're on this, if you've heard, there is a need for facilities and playgrounds and programs. I know some of those have been done. I know Northwest did a Camp One last week. So I would encourage other people in the association, if you're interested in spearheading these up, they're really pretty easy to do. Just work with Clay and Tina at the association, but and recruit some good friends like I've been able to do over this last few months to help me out with these. So any elegant thoughts, Miss Dove? I'll put you on the spot. And
I was just going to say, I always do take every opportunity to thank our MPark staff, especially, I cannot believe what they've been able to accomplish in this time. As far as when I go to look for information, I definitely go to our MPark site first because they've done such a fantastic job between the staff and the membership of collecting information, of sorting it to make it easy to find. So as always, appreciate it. And the number of colleague-led webinars that have been available has been just phenomenal. So as always, impressed, grateful. Yeah.
Thank you. Marcy?
Yeah, I would add,
Oh, you're done,
Sorry,
Angela. You're done.
It's important. It's critical information. I got a notification. It turns out that package is a bark box, and I think the dogs knew. So
Oh, they know.
it's there, and they want it. So again, thank you.
Yes, follow Angela's dogs on Instagram. You'll be entertained. Marcy.
Right. Yeah, for us, we went online a few years ago, and our offices for the city of Midland, citywide, aren't even going to open until July 6th. And so we have been so flexible. Everybody's working from home. Everybody's able to remote VPN in, and not all of the city departments are. So we're still registering for volleyball and softball, and we're able to function as if we normally would, except for having that face-to-face component, and not a lot of other city departments are. So it's just being able to be super flexible for us has kept us somewhat out of the weeds, if you will. So
Great, thanks. Pat? Patrick?
So, yeah,
You're still
Gather your thoughts.
yeah, this issue. So, yeah, I think, together as a profession, just sticking together, and being able to, have the conversations, whether they're difficult conversations or not, knowing what everybody's doing, and, just being able to have those resources to lean on, I think, is going to be really important here in the next year. So, I thank everybody for being involved and helping each other out.
Mr. Fletcher.
Yeah, I would just say hang in there. And, we have a lot of very smart people in our profession, but we've had to plan for the unknown, and we've had to think about, how are we going to handle all of this? And then we get floods, and then we get, what's the next thing, and protests, and just check in on each other. We've all been through a stressful time, and check in with your colleagues. And I think there's a lot of value in this format. I think you flip around different panelists and pick a topic. And I think the info sharing really helps a lot of people, because, it's just that one idea, that one trick somebody used, or that one conversation they had with an elected, I think makes a world of difference. So this format, to me, I think is helpful, and based on attendance, I think it's helpful to other people as well.
Finally, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Jeff. I would say invest in technology and rely on your team. Marcy kind of pointed that out. I laugh because earlier this year, I was in a budget discussion with 2 staff members that I trust. I wanted to move everyone to desktops because I didn't see the value in laptops. I lost, and I'm so thankful every day that I was talked off the ledge on saving like $300 a computer for that. But listen to the people around you, invest in technology, and keep pushing forward. I mean, that's what we do. We, Parks and Recreation, we adapt. We do all the time. We overcome budget shortfalls and everything else. And I think other departments, I look around and we're so good at really problem solving and working our way around problems and finding solutions. As a profession, we are, and we don't get enough credit for it. So keep doing what you do.
So I'd just like to, again, thank all of our panelists. I do really appreciate you guys sharing your stories with us. To all the attendees out there, thanks for joining us at lunch, listening in, seeing everybody, hearing these tales. Maybe we shared some laughs with you. I just want to pull Clay Summers back in real quick. Clay, if you had any other final thoughts from an MParks perspective?
No, wonderful job. As always, guys, I certainly do appreciate everybody's participation, and I feel like I just come out of a team huddle there at the end with a little pep talk. And that's usually how I try to wrap these things up. So you guys all one-upped me on that. That was good. I think Jeff and I've had with a couple others, had an ongoing funny thing going on during these. And one of the other things we forgot and we left out that was, a scare was the murder hornet infestation coming. And so I always try to make sure that we don't forget that that's still the next potential issue that we have on the horizon here. And I and Kendall.
No,
and some others
it's the asteroids and the aliens. The asteroids and the aliens. You know, 4th of July.
So we've done our very best to keep our sense of humor, which I appreciate amongst the membership, and even during these calls, sometimes there's some good dialogue behind the scenes. But you guys shared awesome information. So appreciative. I think you're right, Sean. I'm glad you said that. There's a lot of different opportunities for us to do these. Continue to do this even when we're not in pandemic times and flood times. But I think that everybody's comfortable now with these online things. We don't have to all get together in Kalamazoo with 100 of us to be face to face to have an in-depth conversation that makes sense to folks. So thanks to all of you. Thanks, Jeff, for waking up in the middle of the night with the idea for this one, and we certainly appreciate all your time and effort. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.